She didn't notice the roses right away. That's what broke me first. They were sitting in the middle of the table, full bloom, her favorite shade of dusty pink, the one she once said reminded her of childhood summers. She walked right past them, twice. Instead, she kicked off her heels, muttered something about traffic, and checked her phone like it owed her an apology. She smiled at the screen. Not at me, not at the flowers, not even at the table I'd cleared and set for two, though I knew painfully well she wouldn't be staying for dinner. I watched from the hallway, quiet, still like I had been for months. Her laugh came next. Soft, intimate, the kind you think is reserved only for you until you hear it meant for someone else. She texted back quickly. Her fingers danced. Her shoulders relaxed. She hadn't laughed like that with me in a long time. The letter was still under the vase, folded once. No envelope. I didn't need theatrics, just impact. I had rewritten it 12 times, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted the words to land like glass on tile. Quiet, sharp, impossible to ignore. I know that was the first line. No explanations, no accusations. Just 3 syllables that if she still had even a sliver of conscience left, would pull her soul into the floor. She turned around, eventually saw the setting, the candles, the note, and her smile died in inches. She looked at the flowers like they were a threat. She reached for the letter like it was radioactive. She didn't open it right away. She just stood there holding it in 2 fingers, like she was debating whether to read it or run from it. She chose wrong. I watched her read it from behind the kitchen wall. Every line. Her lips stopped moving halfway through. Her eyes scanned faster, then slower, then back to the top. Like she couldn't believe she'd been seen this clearly. Like she was hoping it would end differently the second time. But it didn't. The letter ended with a truth she couldn't argue. You don't get to hurt someone and still be the one who cries. She started crying anyway. That's when I walked in. And I'll tell you what I said in part 2, because it was the only moment in 8 years where I finally had the last word. She didn't say my name when I stepped into the room. She just clutched the letter like it had heat, like it burned her skin. Her mouth was slightly open, but nothing came out. Her mascara had already started to blur at the corners. She always wore waterproof, but emotions have a way of finding their own chemistry. The silence was so loud, I heard the candle flicker. I didn't sit. I didn't ask her why. I didn't scream. I just stood across from her, letting the weight of the moment stay heavy. There's a kind of power in watching someone realize they no longer hold any. She looked at me like she was searching for a version of me that might still be willing to forgive. But I wasn't home anymore. Not really, she finally whispered. You read my phone. It was almost comical. That's where she went first. Not, I'm sorry. Not, please let me explain. But that as if the betrayal could be rearranged depending on who opened which screen. I leaned slightly against the edge of the chair I never got to sit in that night. No, I didn't need to. You left enough breadcrumbs for a blind man to follow. I said it calmly, not coldly. There's a difference. Her jaw clenched. She was trying to shift the blame, rebuild some kind of emotional leverage, but the floor was gone. She knew it. I nodded toward the letter still in her hands. That wasn't written to make you feel guilty. That was written so I'd remember what dignity sounds like. She opened her mouth again, closed it, took a breath. He doesn't mean anything. It's not like I don't. I said just that one word. Flat. Final. Don't take what you broke and try to measure its size like that changes the damage. She looked like she might sit down. She didn't. Instead, she finally moved the flowers off the table and set the letter down as if handling an object that no longer fit inside her world. She glanced at the scrapbook sitting beneath the roses, one I'd placed there that morning. She hadn't noticed it until now. Her fingers hovered over the edge of the cover. I'd filled it with everything we'd built. Plane tickets, Polaroids, napkins from the diner in Oregon, where she first told me she loved me. Our wedding vow cards taped onto the last page. I'd poured hours into it. Not because I wanted praise, but because I believed the past still held weight in the future. Now it just looked like evidence from another life. "I was lonely," she said finally. And I almost laughed. "You were lonely?" "I sat across from you for months trying to reach someone who already left. I asked. I listened. I even thought maybe it was me. Maybe I wasn't enough. But you weren't lonely. Elise, you were just selfish enough to chase comfort and too cowardly to admit you didn't want to fix what we had." Her eyes dropped. It wasn't guilt. It was exposure. A naked truth. I grabbed my keys from the bowl by the door. "I won't make a scene. I won't torture things or tell your family. But don't call me. Don't try to explain this with timelines or technicalities. We're past the details now." I walked toward the door. She took a step forward, her hand reaching out like muscle memory, like reaching for me was once automatic. But she didn't touch me. Maybe she knew it would break her more than it would shake me. Before I left, I turned just enough to let the final words settle into the space she'd made hollow. "You made a choice. I just finally believed you." Then I left. Not to a friend's couch, not to a hotel. I drove to the old lake house my uncle left me years ago. The one Elise always said smelled like cedar and old regrets. It smelled like freedom now. And I sat there on the dusty porch, listening to the sound of wind on the water. It was the first quiet that didn't feel like punishment. The roses are probably still on the table. The letters probably still open. And somewhere in that house, filled with everything I thought was sacred, Elise is reading the scrapbook from a man she used to love while texting a man who never had to earn her. And I am finally starting to breathe again. The first night alone at the lake house was strange. I thought I'd feel hollow, shattered. But it wasn't that. It was more like the ringing silence after an explosion when everything is still. But you can feel the edges of what just happened vibrating in the air. I didn't unpack. I just left the backpack by the door, opened the windows, and sat cross-legged on the floor with a mug of something lukewarm I didn't remember making. No TV, no music, just the creaking of old wood and the occasional splash of something in the water outside. The peace wasn't comforting yet, but at least it wasn't sharp. It wasn't until the second night that I made the mistake of opening my email. I knew better, but curiosity wrapped in pain has its own gravity. There were 3 messages from Elise, 2 unread voicemails, 1 subject line that read, simply, "I made a mistake." That was insulting. A mistake is using the wrong detergent, forgetting a birthday, burning dinner. Sleeping with someone else for months while lying to my face is a campaign of dishonesty. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Repeated. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something worse. I scrolled through her social media. It wasn't rage-fueled or obsessive. It was just passive curiosity, the kind you get when you slowed down at the scene of an accident, even though you know you shouldn't look. I wasn't even logged in. Just a quiet digital ghost hovering. The anniversary post was still up, caption from earlier that morning before she found the letter. A filtered photo of our hands holding coffee mugs, cropped from a picture I took last year. The caption read, 8 years, countless memories, forever to go. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just closed the browser and sat with the horrible realization that even I had believed those words once. And she was able to post them after planning a weekend with someone else. Who does that? Who smiles at their betrayal while romanticizing the corpse of a marriage? But something told me I hadn't seen the worst of it yet. And I was right. On the 3rd day, the lake house phone rang. It almost startled me. I hadn't heard that line ring since my uncle passed. No one even had the number except my mother. Or so I thought. I picked up, already bracing for her voice, but it wasn't Elise. It was someone else. "Graham," the man said, unsure. I'm not sure how to start this. I don't even know if you know who I am." I knew immediately. The voice was smug, self-sure, just like the memory of him. Julian, Elise's ex. The one she swore was a closed chapter. The one who once showed up drunk to our engagement party and made some passive-aggressive toast about how some people just don't know what they lost until they see someone else pretend to deserve it. And now, here he was calling my retreat using a number that no one should have had. "What the hell do you want?" I asked. My voice didn't shake. I was glad for that. "I didn't call the gloat," he said. Which of course meant he did. "I just thought you deserved to know something. Elise never meant for you to find out. I'm guessing you figured it out the hard way." Silence. "She told me she was leaving you." Another pause. "She said she was giving it one more anniversary, just to be sure. Then she was going to end it. I told her not to drag it out. But, well, guess she's still good at lying." Huh. I felt the room tilt slightly. That was new. "She wanted to do it gently," he added. Like that made it better. "But the timing just wasn't right. I guess you forced her hand." I couldn't believe I was hearing this. Julian, the man who broke her heart in college, the one who cheated on her in public, the one she once described as the living proof that lust can be stupid, was now the recipient of her future plans. "How did you get this number?" I asked. "She gave it to me," he said, "last week." Of course she did. I didn't say anything else. I just hung up. And that was when it really hit me. Elise hadn't been caught. She had been interrupted. I hadn't exposed a secret life. I'd simply walked in before she could repurpose it as a new beginning with a fresh story. And she was going to cast herself as the brave one, the one who finally chose happiness. And I would have been the clueless man she tried so hard not to hurt. I stared at the wall for maybe an hour. Then I stood up, grabbed a notepad, and started writing again because I realized I wasn't done yet. I had one more letter to deliver, and this time, she'd have to read it in front of someone else. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a little. It wasn't restlessness. It was resolve. A kind of cold clarity settled into me. That slow-burning truth that nothing you say in the moment of betrayal ever lands quite right. Unless you say it in their moment. Elise had rewritten our story in her mind, painted herself as the one making the brave leap forward while I stayed in the past. So be it. If she wanted to play heroine, then I'd give her the stage and the script. It took me 5 hours to finish the second letter, not because I didn't know what to say, but because every line needed to cut like honesty does, deep and bloodless. No theatrics, just truth so undeniable it wouldn't leave room for excuses. I wrote it in longhand for pages, every word pressed hard enough to bleed through the paper. By the time I finished, my knuckles ached, and I'd torn through 2 pins. This letter wouldn't wait on a dining table. It would be delivered at a place she couldn't escape from. I'd learned from Julian's call that Elise hadn't just planned to leave me. She'd crafted a full narrative in her head. One, or I'd be too passive, too stunned, maybe even grateful she let me down gently. The kind of story she could tell mutual friends with just enough sadness in her eyes to sound noble. I refused to let that version exist. So, I did something Elise never expected from me. I showed up. Not at our house, not at her workplace. I showed up at her friendship circle. The same group of people she leaned on when she needed to vent about me being distant or too sensitive. The same friends who smiled at me during Koo's dinners, knowing full well that Elise was sneaking off afterward with someone else. I never blamed them directly, but I knew most of them had suspicions, and not one of them had the spine to speak up. So I gave them a story they couldn't pretend not to hear. I waited until Friday night. Elise was attending a casual wine thing at her best friend Maline's townhouse, the kind of event where women wear expensive cardigans and call each other babe unironically. I wore a sweater Elise hated. Said it made me look like a substitute teacher. It felt poetic. I walked in uninvited. Maline opened the door, startled but too polite to shut it in my face. The room went quiet the second they saw me. Elise had her back to me, laughing, holding a glass of something red. She turned when the silence dragged too long. Her face cracked before her expression could catch up. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell. I simply nodded at her and held out the envelope. "I won't stay," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. "I just wanted you to read this here in front of the people who only ever heard your side." You could have heard a pin drop between the clinking glasses. She stared at the envelope like it might explode. I turned around before she could speak and walked out, letting the door close behind me. No storming, no slamming, just absence. Controlled, deliberate. I drove 3 blocks, parked, and sat in silence. And I waited. 20 minutes later, the call started. First, it was her friend Christine. I didn't answer. Then, Maline. Then, a number I didn't recognize. I sat through them all, letting the phone buzz like a dying insect on the passenger seat. Finally, Elise texted, just 4 words. "How could you do this?" I smiled. Not out of malice, but because for the first time in months, she finally knew what it felt like to be staggered, to be stripped, to be seen, and all I did was hold up a mirror. She wasn't ready for that, but I was just getting started, because the next step wouldn't be personal, it would be public. She didn't respond again that night, though. I watched the typing bubble come and go a few times. That in itself was satisfying, knowing she was spinning, pacing, probably clawing for the right combination of words that could make her the victim in all this. But I had pulled the curtain back now. Her audience was wide awake. No amount of charm could stuff the truth back inside the bottle. The second that envelope left my hand, her carefully choreographed exit strategy crumbled. But I wasn't finished. Exposing her to her friends was a controlled burn, a warning shot. Now came the real fracture, one that couldn't be swept under a rug or softened with wine-soaked apologies. We had an anniversary trip planned months before all this came to light. A weekend retreat at a mountain spa resort 2 hours outside the city. We were supposed to leave Saturday morning. Elise booked the deluxe suite with a forest view. She insisted it would reignite the spark, and I, like a fool, believed her. Even paid for half. I canceled my reservation quietly the day after I found out about Julian. But I didn't delete the booking. I forwarded it to Julian. Yes, him. It was a risk, but I had a plan. I included no message, no accusation, just a copy of the itinerary, the room number, the weekend Eldezi had scheduled for both of us while planning to leave me behind. I left it to his ego to interpret and act. A man like Julian wouldn't resist that bait, especially not if he suspected Elise had started to retreat once things got real. And I was almost certain she had. After that, I made one final move. I scheduled a mass email to go out at 10 a.m. Saturday morning to our shared circle of family, friends, co-workers who had known us as the stable couple. The subject line was simple: clarity after 8 years. It contained only 2 paragraphs. No anger, no revenge, no graphic details. Just this. You may be hearing different versions of what happened between Elise and me. Before you form opinions, I wanted you to have mine without embellishment, without noise. Elise made choices that permanently altered our marriage. I won't attack her character, but I will protect my own. If you've ever loved us both, I hope you'll show me the same dignity I've shown her. By not asking questions I won't answer. I've said all I needed to say, with respect and with finality. Then I hit schedule, closed the laptop, and left the lake house. I didn't go far, just into town. A small diner with vinyl booze and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. I sat in the corner and ordered pancakes. Something about them felt grounding, childhood safe. I ate slow, staring out the window at the highway where Elise would be driving soon, completely unaware that the walls were closing in. At 10:08 a.m., my phone buzzed once. Julian. Did you mean to send that to me? I didn't reply. At 10:11 a.m., Elise called. I let it ring. She called again. Then again. Finally, she left a voicemail. Her voice was tight, furious, fighting to remain composed. Graham, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but this is cruel. You had no right to drag him into this. Whatever issues we had, this isn't the way. I tried to be kind. I was going to tell you. She paused. Then her voice cracked. You've humiliated me. Do you understand that? They're all texting me. My mother called in tears. What do you want from me? Graham. An apology. Closure. Fine, I'm sorry. But don't act like this makes you noble. You're not above this. You just made it worse for everyone. And there it was, the truth in her tone. Not guilt, but embarrassment. She wasn't sorry she betrayed me. She was sorry she got caught in the light. I stepped outside the diner and finally breathed like a man with nothing left to prove. The world didn't change. The sky didn't part. But the tightness in my chest had lessened. For the first time in nearly a year. I didn't feel like a ghost in my own life. That night, I got one last message from her. A single sentence. I hope someday you realize how much you've destroyed. I almost laughed because she still thought she was the one who lost something. But what she never understood is that you can't destroy someone who's already rebuilt themselves. And I wasn't done rebuilding yet. 3 days after I sent that letter and walked out of Miline's house, I got a message that stopped me mid-step in the middle of a grocery aisle. I had just picked up a box of cereal when my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in over a year. Mara Henderson. If that name doesn't mean anything to you, that's fine. It didn't mean much to me either until I read the message. She was a freelance graphic designer Elise had worked with on a few side projects. Young, overly polite, the kind of woman who always felt like she was apologizing for standing in a room. I'd only met her twice, maybe 3 times. At one point, Elise had invited her to a wine night, said she was trying to give her more confidence. I barely remembered her face. Her message was short. Hi, Graham. I know this is probably strange. I heard about everything. I wanted to tell you something I think you deserve to know. Can we talk? I sat in my car for 15 minutes, staring at the screen. Something about the way she phrased it. It didn't feel like gossip or pity. It felt heavier, measured, like she'd been holding it in, waiting for a moment when it would finally matter. So, I called. She answered immediately. Her voice was steady. No small talk. First. I'm sorry, she said. I should have said something sooner, but I didn't know how. Elise used people. You probably know that now, but I didn't realize until it was too late that I was one of them. I stayed quiet, just listened. She told me she was in a loveless marriage. Mara continued that you were emotionally distant. She said she felt invisible and trapped. That she couldn't leave because you were going through a hard time, and she didn't want to break you. My hands clenched on the steering wheel. I believed her. Mara whispered. We all did. But Graham, she wasn't just seeing Julian. Silence. She was seeing me, too. My heart didn't just drop. It felt like it folded in on itself. All this time, I had been reconstructing the betrayal in one direction. Straight line. Her and Julian. A twisted, humiliating affair, but one with some basic contour, something you could name. Now she had just added a new dimension, a second secret, a second lie I hadn't even thought to imagine. I finally spoke. "Are you saying you and Elise?" "Yes," she said softly. "It started 6 months ago. She kissed me after one of our late-night editing sessions. I didn't think she meant it, but she told me she hadn't felt anything in her marriage for years. She made me feel like I was rescuing her, like we had this sacred connection she'd been denied. I fell for her, stupidly." I swallowed hard. "She told me I was the only one," she said, voice trembling now. "And then last week, I found out about Julian. I confronted her. She laughed, said she never promised anything, that I was naive if I thought it was more than an escape." I could feel the air thickening inside the car, my vision blurred. I wasn't angry, not in the way people think rage feels. This was different. It was like watching the last bit of yourself you were, still defending, die quietly in the corner. Mara continued, voice now, but with tears. "I don't want anything from you. I just wanted you to know. I didn't want to carry it around anymore. I'm so sorry." I thanked her, not because I knew how, but because it was all I had left. After the call, I didn't drive home. I didn't drive back to the lake house. I drove to a small cliff overlook about 30 minutes outside town. A place Elise and I once went to stargaze back when things were still innocent. I sat on the hood of my car and let the sky falling around me. Nothing made sense. The woman I loved wasn't just unfaithful, she was something I couldn't name. Not cruel, not evil. Just void. A black hole with a wedding ring. And I wasn't even angry at her anymore. I was angry at the version of myself that spent years explaining away red flags, because I thought love meant forgiving too much. I stayed there until sunrise, and when the sun crept up behind the trees, I made one final decision. I was going to file for divorce. But not just that. I was going to file publicly, transparently, with no NDA, no sealed terms, no false, amicable separation posted on social media. The truth was going to stand unfiltered, because if Elise wanted to dance in the dark, she should have known. Eventually, someone would flip the light on. I didn't wait. The morning after that call with Mara, I drove straight to my attorney's office. I hadn't been in the building since we first met about an old copyright issue years ago. Back then, I joked with the receptionist about how I'd never end up here for something as messy as divorce. That version of me, naive, trusting, patting his life with love notes and breakfast trays, is long gone now. I walked in and said 7 words I never thought would pass through my mouth. It's time. I went out for good. What followed was a blur of paperwork, signatures, and conversations that felt cold and transactional, but necessary. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to ruin her life. I just wanted to be done with the fiction. Every document I signed felt like another layer of her illusion peeling off me. But the real moment came when I handed my lawyer the letter. Not the one from the anniversary, not the one she read. Surrounded by friends who suddenly realized they never knew her. This was a new one. A formal statement attached to the petition that I request to be public record. I had every right. I wasn't disclosing graphic details. I wasn't naming names. But I was refusing the silence. No NDA. No sugar-coated joint announcement. Just a declaration filed into the system that simply read, "This marriage is ending, not because of irreconcilable differences, but because of premeditated deceit, emotional manipulation, and an ongoing pattern of infidelity that the respondent has not denied. I have chosen peace, and this is my path to it." I left the courthouse with copies in a plain folder. My hands shook, but my spine didn't. I was finally standing inside the life I was meant to build. One without gaslighting, without holding my breath, without pretending that love meant absorbing the pain quietly. I thought that would be the end of it, but at least wasn't done pretending. 2 days later, I received a group message. Not a private one. A group message. 36 people. Friends, coworkers, mutuals we'd collected over the years. Her opening line. Some of you may have seen the news. It's important that you hear the real story before assumptions get out of control. I froze. She was trying to spin it again. One last, desperate grasp at the narrative. She claimed our split had been mutual, that I was struggling with self-esteem and mental health issues, and that the recent accusations were emotionally charged misunderstandings during a transitional time. She framed me as unstable. Not angry, not wounded. Unstable. She ended the message with a quote from a therapy book. Sometimes people leave, not because they don't love you, but because they finally love themselves. I stared at the screen for a full minute. She was weaponizing compassion to mass betrayal. Using polished, performative language to cover her tracks and paint herself as the brave one. And I could have ignored it. I could have taken the higher road. But I didn't, because this wasn't about her anymore. This was about the quiet men like me who never spoke up, who let people assume, let lies harden into reality because it felt polite. So I replied. One message, one time. Elise, you're right. People should hear the real story. So, I'll let the court records speak for themselves. For anyone who's curious, you can look up case number 4271G2025 in the public filings. Everything's there. No embellishments, just truth. No insults, no rage, just facts. Anchored, calm, unflinching. The chat exploded within minutes. Some people left the group. Others messaged me privately, apologizing for what they hadn't seen, or what they had but ignored. I didn't answer most of them. I wasn't looking for allies. I didn't need applause. I just needed her to finally feel what it's like when the mask slips and no one offers to hold it up for you. That evening, I got one last voicemail from her. Her voice was quiet, hollow. "I hope you're proud," she whispered. "You ruined me." But that's the thing. I didn't ruin her. I just stopped covering for her. And in the silence that followed, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. It's been 7 weeks since I walked away from Elise. 49 days since I placed the roses and that letter on the table. In that time, I haven't seen her once. Not in court, not in town, not in passing. It's as if the world did what I was too afraid to do for years. It removed her from the center of my life. At first, the silence was brutal. I'd grown so used to the noise of her texts, her moods, her curated chaos that, without it, I felt untethered. You'd think escaping a toxic relationship would feel like a sprint to freedom, but honestly, it's more like learning to walk again after your legs have been broken, slowly, over time, by someone you trusted to carry you. But something changed last week. I was at a bookstore downtown, just killing time, not looking for anything in particular, when a boy, maybe 10, asked if I could help him reach a comic book on the top shelf. His mom was on the other side of the store paying for their coffee. I smiled and handed it to him. He said, "Thanks," and ran off. I know it sounds small, but I stood there for a full minute after that, staring at the shelf, realizing something had shifted. That boy didn't know me, didn't pity me, didn't see me as a man trying to rebuild his identity from the ashes of betrayal. He just saw a guy standing tall enough to reach the top. That's when I finally understood I wasn't broken anymore. I was just healing quietly, on my own terms. A few days later, I booked a solo trip to Vermont, not to run, not to disappear, just to experience something untouched by Elise's fingerprints. The trip was simple: mountains, books, a cabin with a fire that crackled like comfort. I hiked, I wrote. I remembered who I was before. I spent so many years trying to fix someone who never wanted to be whole. And while I was there, something strange happened. I laughed. Not that performative chuckle you give people in conversation. A real laugh. Loud, unapologetic. I was reading a dumb roadside diner review in a local magazine that said the coffee tasted like regret in a styrofoam cup, and I just lost it. I laughed so hard I had to wipe my eyes. It felt like someone had handed me a key I forgot I'd lost. When I got home, the final divorce papers were waiting in my mailbox. Signed. Stamped. Final. No notes. No apology. Just the closure I never thought would come. I didn't cry. I didn't even sit down. I smiled, walked inside, and poured myself a cup of coffee that thankfully didn't taste like styrofoam or regret. And now I'm not surviving anymore. I'm living. I've joined a local photography group. Started running again. Reconnected with a few friends I drifted away from. Not because of shame, but because I finally had the space to show up fully. I don't flinch when people ask me what happened. I tell them the truth. But I don't carry it like a weapon anymore. I carry it like armor. As for Elise, I don't think about her much. Sometimes she flickers through my mind like an old movie you don't need to watch again. Familiar, but no longer relevant. I hope she finds whatever it is she was always chasing. I hope she stops confusing drama for depth. But more than that, I hope she learns that you can't love someone fully while keeping escape routes in your back pocket. And me. I'm okay. More than okay. Actually, I'm rebuilding, slowly, steadily, on ground I know is mine, with people who see me as I am, not as someone to fix or forget, but someone who finally remembered how to stand. So, to the quiet men, to the ones who feel invisible, to the ones who love too softly, and got blamed for the silence. This part is for you. You're not weak for hoping. You're not foolish for trying. But one day, you'll realize the greatest thing you ever did was leave before you lost yourself completely. And when you do, leave the letter, take the peace, and walk out into the rest of your dawn.